Hey everyone, welcome to Data and Science Upstarts, where we cover entrepreneurial topics for data scientists and statisticians. My name is Glenn Rykalpi. Let's meet today's Upstart. Hi everyone, welcome to the first of many conversations on the topic of statistical and data science consulting. Today's guest is Julia Varshavsky, who has very kindly listed out 8 key ideas of things that you need to know about before you get into consulting. And those topics are preparing yourself to do consulting, finding your first customer, making a consulting business, contracts and insurance, consulting and tech stack, finding more customers, choosing your business model, and finally, funding your startup. That's quite a list, but we'll be going through them just so that people have a broad idea of the landscape, and then we'll be having a large number of conversations going into these things in detail. So, Julia, thank you for coming here today. Could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Glenn. So my name is Julia Varshavsky, and I'm the founder and CEO and a managing director of OccamPoint. And at OccamPoint, we put together agile teams that work with life science and healthcare companies and help them with the de-risking of their product development paths.
Cool. And now we'll just hop into it because there's a lot to cover that you've outlined for us. So the first item that you have on this list of the basics that someone who's interested needs to know is preparing yourself to do consulting. What kind of prep work do people need to do? You don't just quit your day job and jump in.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the first and foremost, one needs to think through conceptually, is consulting something that you really want to do? And looking at your everyday job and if you're a statistician working or data scientist working in pharma, you do consulting every day. You work cross-functionally. You have customers from medical doctors who are logistical operators, who are your bosses are your customers, people who are reporting to you are your customers. So do you enjoy having an interaction with them? Do you enjoy, as a data scientist, do you enjoy data sleuthing? Do you enjoy the entrepreneurial aspects of your job, which is really finding gaps and finding problems that nobody has thought of before and going about finding solutions for those problems, and then convincing your people that you work with that those are truly the gaps and those are truly the solutions. So this is the first step is trying to figure out whether consulting is right for you, is asking that question. And then I think the rest of it is also pretty natural. Do good work in what you do currently. And by doing so, you acquire a lot of good connections and people who will support you, and they will support you throughout your career, no matter how it evolves. And if it evolves in becoming an entrepreneur, they will help you find your clients. They will help you propagate through their networks who you are and what you do. So basically, the bottom line: do good work, be purposeful, and think about opportunities. And the right opportunity will knock on your door.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point. I know a lot of people who basically their first step to anything is you become competent at a task. You become a competent scientist, you become a competent statistician. And if you are competent and nice to be around, that really just opens most of the doors for you that people are willing. One thing is, obviously, we're talking to you, someone with lots of experience. Does that preparation work that you need include finding a mentor? Someone who can check that you've actually done your homework and evaluated yourself.
Well, I think mentors are great. Having a mentor in general is a great idea. I've had lots of mentors and people that I leaned on in my career progression. And these are the people that are my colleagues, my bosses, people that reported into me throughout my career. You learn from all of those interactions. And the key thing is to listen what questions they ask, to listen to their feedback, to listen to what the frustrations might be, what the high points are, and to take that in and see if there's, again, a gap that maybe needs to be filled. You don't have to incorporate to work on the gap, you can do this within within the farm environment or biotech environment that you're currently on, and see if you're making a dent in trying to get your point across. Um, and then, seek feedback from those folks around you on how you do. Having a formal mentor could also be helpful. And within the corporate structures, there are opportunities to seek that formally. Excuse me. I personally had hired an outside coach at a point in the career where I was trying to figure out what to do next, which is very much the point of this conversation. And I was thinking that I might go entrepreneurial based on what I was discovering within myself. And those conversations were tremendous. So yes, by all means, how, go and get yourself a mentor. How to find a mentor? Just look around at people that you work with. Who do you want to learn from? Who can teach you something? And go ask them.
Cool. So, yeah, basically, for item number one, preparing yourself, you have to be going through a checklist, asking yourself some important questions, and also get some help for other people who are going to help you ask those hard questions.
Exactly.
Yeah. Item number two, finding your first customer. So obviously you're not really a consultant unless you have at least one customer. But presumably the first customer is the hardest to get. So what should you do? What are those steps of finding the first customer?
Well, I think for most statisticians, that's actually an easy part. If you are doing good work on your current environment, you already have a lot of customers and they value you. So all you need to do is to let them know that you are looking to become independent and ask them to help you find customers. Sometimes the customers that are already working with you, if you're part of a smaller company, they might actually come in and seek you out. So a lot of statisticians, I think, with our kind of expertise, it's so highly valued. They already have the first customer before they form a business. And I think as statisticians, we tend to be a little bit more less risk averse. And so people wouldn't even incorporate unless they are pretty confident that they either already have the first customer or they're going to get them once they become independent. So I think for me personally, I have a slightly different business model. So I did go and seek out the sources that could lead me to a customer pipeline. But for the most part, for statisticians who are just looking to become independent consultants, that is not a problem.
Cool.
That has been my experience from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So perhaps a good litmus test for whether or not you've gained enough experience and demonstrate yourself well enough is that you aren't really needing to go out and seek to find that first customer. It's the fact that effectively once you're already in a position by which you can simply inform your set of colleagues that you're looking to become independent.
Yeah, and see their reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Are they excited about it? They might start just popping out ideas for new customers to you right away. And that would be a good litmus test for whether you're cut out for it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. And I guess that's also just a good indicator whether or not people think you're doing a good enough job in your current role.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. So the next thing, so you now have your first interested client or customer. Item 3 is incorporating and creating that actual business entity. Does it actually matter what business type you choose?
Yeah, so good question. And this is something I had to educate myself because, I've never taken a business course or a tax accounting course. And so I talked to my tax accountant and then I read some books. But basically, first of all, everybody should be advised that incorporation is a better way to go than continuing to be a sole proprietor. A lot of statisticians do choose to not incorporate, and that could expose them to risk, to personal liability risk. So if you incorporate and become an LLC, for example, which is the first step that many folks do, it protects your personal assets and So it's a good thing to do. It also offers some tax advantages. So there's an LLC, there's an S corp, and there's a C corp, are the major sort of denominations. And again, you should talk to your tax advisor to help you decide what is um, the right starting point for you. But in a nutshell, um, S corporation allows you to involves a lot more management and record keeping, and you probably want to do it if you want to be more than just one person business and think of growing. So that's sort of the nutshell. C corp is right for somebody who would want to eventually take their company public, and that's what investors like. Again, it involves much more rigor in how the records are kept, how there are more things that you could do with taxes. It's double taxed, actually. So it's a significant expense, and and so it should be thought through very in a lot of detail with your tax advisor as well as your probably attorney. But it's you're not locking yourself into. Don't think about my gosh, I have to choose a type of entity and then I'm going to be that entity for the rest of my life. No, you can switch. And natural progression again for a lot of people is an LLC and then going into S corp, and then if they're so lucky and want to become big, then C corp. Some people do start with an S corp, and so anyway, talk to your tax accountant is my
Mhm. Yeah,
advice.
definitely. And I guess this is always a good time to put in the disclaimer. Obviously, we're not giving any legal advice here. Um, at the same time, we will be covering this in much more detail because it is an interesting bit of strategy that uh, people who are interested in going into consulting should know about because, you know, there are legal, there are many legal and business implications what they choose.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess on that note, some of those legal and business implications are the contracts and insurance you can get. So this is a nuts and bolts issue, topic number 4 that you mentioned. Um, and so again, prefacing this with saying this is not any legal advice, but why do consultants need insurance in particular?
Yeah, so this is something I also had to discover for myself and had thought and have asked my mentors. So some of your mentors, if you're starting a business, should be small business owners, should be consultants like yourself, and go ask around. What do they do? So not everybody carries insurance, and it's really a choice that's based on your tolerance of personal risk. And you should ask yourself a question. I mean, how much revenue you think you're going to be bringing? What types of companies you're working with? What is it that you do for these companies? Well, for example, so the general, yeah, for example, are you working with a lot of proprietary data that has, are your conclusions that you're deriving from that data, do they have material impact? How much material? So how much risk would you incur if you did something wrong? Calculated your p-value wrong. Um, and that depends on also how you work with these companies. What is your role? Who is making the decisions? So the types of general insurance. So I made a decision to have insurance. I, did bare bones. And my company, I have the specifics of my company is that I have a lot of contractors that I work with that do work for the clients. So I had to think through how um, well, first of all, there's general liability. So if you have an office, somebody comes into your office, breaks a leg, what's going to happen? Then there is errors and emissions policy. So this is the type of thing that I just talked about. What if you calculated something wrong? What if the contractors that you employed did something wrong? Do they have insurance? So you have to kind of think through that and ask them these questions. And lastly, if you work I think one of the specifics of our job, we work with a lot of data that is highly confidential and has a potential of having a huge impact. And so, what if something were to happen with this data? And the lead-in question to that: Are you housing any of the data? Are you doing any submission work? Are you doing work that should be high adhere to significant validation practices?
So by
All of these.
submission work, you mean submission, for example, to the FDA?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
thank you for clarifying. Regulatory submission.
Mm-hmm.
So, depending on what type of work you do and how your business is structured in terms of your systems and in terms of your personnel, you would incur different levels of risk. And certainly, if you are aspiring to become like a small CRO, you should have insurance. If you're a sole proprietor doing clinical trial designs for a client, the case could be made that maybe you don't need to have that expense, and a lot of people don't. But if you are advising on strategies that could lead to and utilizing data decisions that could lead to things with material impact, I think it's wise to think about the need to have one.
Is it also worth pointing out that a lot of these insurance costs are relatively small compared to the amount of money that's coming in? So it's not as if you're going to be sending, 2/3 of your income to insurance. It's these costs relative to the amount of money that consultants have coming in is actually fairly, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly right. So I think the average, if you're just a small single sole proprietor or small LLC with like one or two people, what you should be expecting to spend is maybe in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 thousand a year. One caveat there, and that's something that I have encountered, is that you have to read the policy
Yeah.
and understand the clauses, and sometimes it's not easy to do. And that's one area where I had to actually consult an attorney. Because, I mean, having a policy is great only if something wrong happens and they actually follow through on it. And so it is important to understand kind of the nuances there sometimes. And I did spend some time learning it, and it was hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like one quick example would be like cybersecurity, or like cybersecurity insurance, where depending on the nature of the work that you're doing, you actually need to have a special type of insurance because it specifically covers the type of mistake that a data scientist or a statistician might make vis-a-vis data access and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think cyber insurance also particularly covers loss of data. If somebody were to break into your server or something like that. So that's so if you do, again, going back to, if you do plan on housing a client's data, that is an absolute must.
Mm-hmm. Now, on to the other half of this, which is the contracts. Why do data scientists need to be savvy about contracts? Are there some basic common mistakes that people make?
Yeah, so contracts, I think you have to, well, first of all, you need to understand your own contract. If you're going to be working with a client, they're going to send you a contract, or you might have your own template. And you might subcontract work to other people as well. So the major thing about contracts to me is understanding the confidentiality clauses and proprietary information clauses. So you will be dealing with a lot of confidential information, and your client is going to want you not to disclose it to anybody. Well, you might think that's self-understood, but what if you're working for other clients? And what constitutes sort of conflict of interest? And some clients would be very particular about if you're working in this space, then you can't work with anybody in that space. Let's say this space is oncology. Well, that's very broad. You might want to work with other clients in oncology. So you would want to be able to negotiate with them and always disclose that you're working or think of working in such and such a space. Maybe you already have a client. Would they have a conflict? So, have an open dialogue. So that's one area is understanding the contract in terms of limiting or not limiting your capability to work with others. The other one that people tend to miss is if you work with contracts that other clients send you for you to sign, they're going to be one-sided conflict, one-sided contracts. They're going to be only protecting their side, most likely, their side of confidentiality, their side of proprietary information. Well, as a data scientist, you might have your own. You might have programs that you might intend to work to use, have repeated use. You might have your networks are proprietary and information, and you might consider it confidential to a point. And other things like that. So you would want that protected in your contract. And typically, these are not um, things that your clients would think about. So you might want to develop your own template, and I would advise to develop that with an attorney, a small business attorney that knows pharmaceutical business, and have that layout. And so then you could either provide that to your client, or if they send you their contract, you can reflect on what they have and what they don't versus what you would have liked to have, and have a conversation with them about it. There is a little bit of art involved in negotiating contracts, and that sometimes if you're trying to land a big client and they're going to have a humongous, clauses there that you might, to an extent, not like, sometimes people still go for it because risks are small.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to violate those clauses, and you want that client. And so as you become bigger, you kind of become. You start having a stronger position for negotiation. But as you're starting your business, you always have to think a little bit with a grain of salt whether something is worth arguing over.
Cool. Item 5 on your list is the consulting tech stack. So we've talked a little bit about, the strategy for accessing clients' data and integrating with their work a little bit. But there's also, so that's like the data side of things, but there's also like the business tech stack. For example, what you might need for like billing, accounting, payroll, all those types of things, taxing, legal software. What are sort of those extra bits of software or helper functions, if you will, that people need to be aware of, so they don't spend all their time just trying to keep their business, run their business, but they can actually do the consulting work?
Yeah, sure. So I am happy to talk through the basics. Well, first of all, you should keep your billing separately, billing and your accounting and your checkbooks separate for your business and for your personal expenses. So that's regardless of how you're incorporated or not. That's just a good practice. So in
So
terms
not
of
going to jail. Yeah.
well, and I think just it just will keep you sane. It's a good business practice to it helps you think through your business accounting, what's working, what's not working, and it's required. For billing, I'd say keep it simple. A lot of people just start by creating a template out of Excel spreadsheet or a Word document and just going with it. There's some good templates there that you could use. I did eventually hire a bookkeeper, and she's doing billing for me. But again, we're very down to the bones. Basically, we have created that template, and she's just reusing it. That template should have information about you, about your client, about the work that you have done for the client, your billing rate, the billing period. Kind of like the basic information. There's some good software. There are good and a fairly cheap, I think, software solutions for billing. I can't quite think of them. I think QuickBooks has some. Bill.com has some. Basically, anything that does any sort of accounting would have a way to invoice your client and collect that money. I am currently not investing in that solution, but as I continue to grow, I may. I think it makes sense to do if you have like maybe more than 10 clients or something like that. Then and then more than 2, 3 people in your business that are your permanent employees. That becomes kind of cost saving. So for accounting, I already mentioned I do use an accountant, and it's I think it's a personal choice as well. Like, where do you want to spend most of your time? Accounting does take time. And as you have your money flowing from various clients and you have expenses, they just know how to do that best. And we use QuickBooks software for tracking that, which a lot of small businesses are using and is recommended for small businesses. So that's what I do. Let's see what other nuts and bolts. Legal. Should I talk about legal a little bit?
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah.
So again, my business is a little bit more unusual in that I have a lot of contracts. So I did have to have an attorney that actually helped me put my legal contractual framework, and I have a lot of contractual templates that we use. If you are just a single operator starting out, you may not need to have, an attorney that you constantly talk to, but it's a good idea to talk to somebody before you form your business to understand, like all of those things that we already covered. You can ask them these questions, and then they could be your go-to when you're signing new contracts and you think you have a question about something. It's good to have a person that you can legally consult and see what the risks are. So that's my advice on legal and legal. The type of people that one would go after, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to find the right attorney. So you should reflect on the type of the business that you have, talk to your mentors, see who they are using. With attorneys, it's always the word of mouth is the best way. But small business attorneys that have some experience in working with biotech pharma, if that's what you do, are a good source.
Cool. Item 6 on your list is another strategy question: finding more customers. So, how do you build off your first client? And are there some broad, effective strategies to do this?
Yeah, so this is something that I think an entrepreneur continues to think about throughout the life cycle of their business. And this is something that constantly evolves. And I've tried a lot of various approaches. But if you are consulting and doing one-off consulting with a client, usually and do good work, usually people get to know about you really quickly. And again, I think statisticians and data scientists are in a very fortunate position. There's so few of us, and our skills are so highly valued. So few people understand how to do what we do, and there's job security in that. If you're working within corporate environment or if you're consulting. I mean, I think the problem is actually the other way around: how to find good statisticians and data scientists.
Mhm.
But yeah, your first client would likely be a good source for connections to your next client. Your network, which you should absolutely keep up, will be a source of your next client. So most people that I know who do consulting, they don't seek their clients. The clients seek them out. And you're also kind of in a fortunate position of being able to select the projects that you like. So that's a pitch for gig economy consulting for you,
Mhm.
Glenn.
Yeah. It actually is, as you mentioned, with the challenge of finding good statisticians and data scientists. Presumably, that's a key aspect of the service that consulting is providing, where it's essentially relieving that issue for the client. Finding because they have one. It's your consultant. That they don't
Right.
have to go out and find a person full time. You're essentially coming in and relieving that issue of for them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So not an issue on the top of the mind of many consultants I know.
Mhm. Cool. So item number 7 is on the list is choosing your consultancy business model. Are there many or only a few business model options for data scientists and consultants? And presumably, it's not just my business models. I do work and they hand me money. There's more to it, right?
Yeah, well, I think there are principally several types of businesses that statisticians and data scientists run. One is the one that we've discussed the most, is being a kind of a solo consultant, where you work on projects, you consult on data strategies, you consult on clinical protocol design, you analyze data, you work with the FDA as a expert, providing expert opinion, or you help usher your clients through a regulatory submission and everything that's involved in that, which is very, very complex. The other type of business is forming a small CRO, and we have some success, in our communities with that. But so once you are, um, a lot of statistical programmers actually, um, and I know a few would um, think about how to make data analysis more efficient and more client friendly, and would form a business around that. Um, so that's forming a CRO, forming a consulting CRO. Sometimes there's a strategy component involved, and that's packaged together. So that's the other type of business is around sort of a traditional CRO business that um, does regulatory submission work, that allows for quality work coming to big pharma clients. The third, I think, is analytics companies and sort of novel software development that people would do with either novel, they identify a pocket of need. Let's say you're in phase 1 clinical trials realm, and there's a lot of work happening in designing progression from one dose finding study to the next, multi-arm, multi-platform trials that are right now very popular. So there are a lot of opportunity for statisticians and data scientists to come in and optimize how that data is collected, how that data is analyzed. A lot of analytic solutions are possible in the space. Um, so these are, I think, the three big the three business models that basically people typically utilize: sole consulting, CRO consulting, and then software development and analytics development.
Cool. And our final topic, item number 8, is funding your consulting startup. So let's say you know all these topics, you're ready to go and start consulting your business. What options do you have to fund it as you get started?
Yeah, great question. So again, depending on how you do it, I think statisticians most of the times are in a very fortunate position. They fund sort of as they go.
Hmm.
So the projects that they embark on pay, and so there's no need for external funding so much. There is some in the beginning with a setup, depending on how big you want to make it, but there are expenses associated with legal fees if you're setting up a contractual framework and want to become, for example, a CRO. There are expenses associated with purchases of software. You have to think about whether you're going to house the data. Do you need a server? And then depends on your business goal and business model. So those could be small, could be big expenses. Accounting costs money. So you have to, have a spreadsheet, write down what you would be spending your money on in your first year, um, and see how much money you need, and do you have any savings that would have those upfront costs covered. But as a statistician, pretty quickly you should be able to um, recoup some of that, at least some of that money through the work that you do because it's highly valued work. So the other source of funding, if you are a analytics company, people do various things. Analytics development requires sometimes substantial resources, especially if you're on the path where you would want to commercialize your piece of software, and that requires significant validation and then commercialization. So companies in that space often do raise money, and there's a whole separate big topic about how one might go about doing that. But because that would require substantial investment, upfront investment. However, again, I think statisticians are in a very good position, and investors love software companies because they're really easily scalable. And once you have a product, you can just license it and collect annual fees. That's, it scales really, really, really nicely that way if you have developed a product that people need. So again, I think funding is a very important consideration. Should think about it. Statisticians and data scientists are in a very fortunate position to be kind of on the top of the pyramid there compared to other scientific areas.
Cool. Thanks for that, Julia. I think that is that's a good overview of it. We're obviously going to be covering these topics and way more in more detail in the future. And I guess also for those listening, if you do have specific data or data science or statistical consulting questions, just pop your questions in the comments, and obviously we'll be accruing those over time and answering them as they come up. So if this sounds of interest, learn more about data science and statistical consulting, just stay tuned. So Julia, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Dan.